First, I'd like to thank Joe Benedict for roping me into this. Joe and I have known each other since 2008, and we see each other at the Flyway, and he's like, hey, you're coming over to DU. Hey, I've got a bunch of talks for you to do. So the word to everybody else, if Joe comes looking for you, you might want to run the other direction. But no, I'm really happy to be here in Florida again. Got to spend some time with Steve and Joe the last couple of days looking at some habitat. And today I just want to kind of talk about what's DU's role in the Southeast, kind of some of the infrastructure of where we are and what we're delivering, and then kind of some of the methods that we're working on to deliver conservation in Florida. As Jamie said, I'm the South Atlantic biologist. We stretch from Virginia to Florida. Let's see if I can get our, didn't want to go there, Jamie. We'll get all the technical stuff worked out here in a second. But we're part of the southern region in the South Atlantic office. DU has gone through some restructuring this year. Seems like we rolled everything into one big year with our 75th anniversary, and everybody said, well, let's restructure at the same time. So our southern regional office is out of Jackson, Mississippi. We've had some restructuring this year where we've lost Kansas, Missouri, and Kentucky. They've gone to the Great Lakes office. And then we picked up Virginia up here, so as we like to tease our friends in Virginia now, we've got a bad humpback in the southern region, but all in all, we're going to really enjoy having them as part of our program. As part of the southern region, we've conserved over 1.6 million acres, which is about 35% of what you see in the United States. To date on projects, over $275 million, and our staff is composed of 49 conservation, 30 grassroots, and 7 development. Where a lot of people ask, well, do we have good representation within this big national entity? And absolutely we do. As far as senior volunteer leadership, there's 20 board members in the southern region, as well as our current president, our current vice president, and our chairman of the board. So lots of good representation in the southern region. The southern region in our restructuring has changed where we now have 2 directors of conservation. Jerry Holden out of Louisiana takes advantage of the western part of our region, and my boss Craig Lashak out of Charleston now covers all these states with the dividing line with the South Atlantic. Regional biologist myself out of Charleston taking the coast, and then we have additional regional biologists in Jackson, Mississippi. We also, a big part of what we do is not only conservation, grassroots fundraising, but also science. As we're seeing more and more, regardless of what we do on the ground, can all be erased in a pen stroke in Washington. We all know the frustrations of what's going on in Washington. So also out of our Jackson, Mississippi office that advises some of our Washington office, we have Tom Mormon as our science director. A lot of you folks might have seen Tom over the years. He's a great asset to us as far as from policy and conservation. Tom really helps us balance what we need to be doing in the field with what we need to be saying on the Hill, and he spent some time in Washington as well. From our South Atlantic office, we've got a small but effective group to cover all that we cover. There's myself, the regional biologist. We also have a land conservation side that addresses some of the easements. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. As well as our engineering staff, we have Danny Bakers, our surveyor and engineer. And Danny works in conjunction with Billy Webster, our senior engineer. A lot of you folks that we've worked with in Florida probably know Billy over the years. Billy took a new role in Jackson, Mississippi this last year to oversee all our engineering staff. Then Jill is our staff. If anybody calls Charleston looking, Jill's the saint that keeps us all straight. And then Craig, my boss, as we like to refer to, the director of herding cats. So he's usually running about 900 different directions. So what are we doing out of the Southern Regional Office? Our main roles is planning and prioritization of projects we deliver. We've got some of our fundraising folks in the room today. Then they're always on us to make sure we're prioritizing and making sure we're doing everything we can with the dollars they bring in. So we're also coordination and delivery of conservation programs, identification and follow-up on new opportunities. A lot of those new opportunities we are looking at are some real exciting things we're seeing in the Gulf Coast with delivering the Restore Act that just came through the transportation bill, as well as some land protection opportunities that we've had with some trading lands opportunities and mitigation. We do provide technical assistance. A lot of people, when they think of DU, and I've noticed it was mentioned in Steve's talk as well, think of the Marsh days. When DU was, we had just money that as money came in, we were looking at projects, identifying projects, and delivering those on the ground. Those days have changed where now we've served more as a leadership role on how we're going to leverage dollars that come in and maximize that to work in our highest priority landscapes. And part of working in identifying what landscapes, we've developed a new strategic plan as well as a new national business plan with 3 major focuses being ducks, people, and money. And a lot of the professionals in the room that have seen the NAWAMP goals and the new rewriting of the National Waterfowl Plan, you'll see these same things echoed. So without people, we can't have the ducks, and of course without the money, we can't have either. So that's kind of our driving principle. It's a project that we're working on through 2016, so those guiding principles will push us for the next 4 years. Like I said, another continual issue that we all see in the room, especially federal and state, is the problems in public policy and working in Washington. Excuse me. Some of the key issues that we're working on that our office in Washington, D.C. is looking at NAWCA. As we all know, NAWCA is a big player in wetlands conservation and restoration throughout the United States, and it's very important to Ducks Unlimited. We've set in our strategic plan a goal of maintaining NAWCA at its current funding levels or increasing it. But also, as we push that initiative, we also want to come back and take the opportunity to capture about 70% of that money. So we push on our policy front, but also we make sure on our conservation front that we're capturing those dollars that we secure in DC. I wouldn't be able to walk out of here without putting my policy hat on and saying, NAWCA and Farm Bill, I'm sure Steve is very instrumental in the Atlantic Flyway Council and working on these issues. These are probably the biggest issues that we're facing as waterfowl managers throughout the country and possibly in my career. I think that my career is very in its infancy. It'll be around for hopefully a long time, but we're seeing the impacts on the prairies and as well throughout the United States through the CRP and the NAWCA funding, that basically work that we've done over the past 10 and 15 years could be wiped away overnight. Everybody's heard the fall flight forecast. We're expecting a wonderful fall flight this year. We've seen brood counts that are through the roof, but what's really making us nervous as an organization is what are those birds going to go back to next year? We're seeing drainage that we've never seen on the prairies. It's so fast with all the commodity rates going through the roof. Some of the sod saber and swamp buster provisions that were in the Farm Bill that have protected us for years, that have disincentivized people tilling up those wetlands, are not there anymore. Commodity prices are through the roof, and people are just going out and deciding where those delineations are and going ahead and tilling right through those grounds. So those are things that we would encourage you to contact your representatives and senators to say, you know, when you guys get back in office, we really need to look at this. NAWCA goes out at the end of, I believe it's September or October for the reauthorization. The Farm Bill is going to be pushed this fall, and basically what we've been seeing in DC, we expect that can to just be kicked on down the road with continuing resolutions. So don't let them forget you're out there and really wanting things to be done. So with our strategic plan, what are we trying to decide? What are we trying to do? How are we trying to deliver? So through 2016, we've got a focus of 480,000 acres in our highest priority areas. You can see on this is some of the rainwater basins in Texas, as well as the Gulf Coastal Plain, the Mississippi Alluvial Valley. So those are some of the focuses we'll be having in our highest priority areas. It's a better blow-up map. As you can see in red, our level 1 priority areas and the breeding areas in the prairie pothole regions of the United States and Canada, the boreal forest, and then in the wintering grounds, the Mississippi Alluvial Valley and the rainwater basins in California. Excuse me, the Central Valley, not the rainwater. And then for the South Atlantic, we've got our coastal plain. So through our new strategic plan, these are some of our highest priority areas that we'll be delivering the majority of our work. This is not to say that we're not going to work outside those areas, but we'll be looking at the highest priorities and the best projects that we can find outside those areas. So through this new strategic plan, the Atlantic coast has been upgraded to a level 2 priority area where it was a level 3 before, and our level 1 areas, of course, being in the Mississippi alluvial valley and the Gulf Coast. So our objectives over the next 4 years is to deliver a minimum of 160,000 acres, and of that, 33,500 in the Mid-Atlantic to the Atlantic Gulf Coast, which includes Florida. We're also, as part of the strategic plan, rolling out a new initiative that we're preparing to send out to our grassroots folks pretty soon for a review and comment. And this will be the initiative where you guys have seen some of the Florida initiatives. We've also had individual state initiatives. Now we're going to be looking at it in a more regional approach where we can tie that regional approach back to a continental approach. So as I said before, we had an elevation of the South Atlantic to a priority 2 area. As the South Atlantic being important, it winters 50% of the waterfowl in the Atlantic Flyway, a year-round home to 5 species, the 2 whistling ducks, mottle ducks, wood ducks, and black ducks in the upper portions of our region. And like I said, it's the link to the breeding grounds is essential. So that's enough about what we're doing regionally. What are we doing to deliver conservation? What's important to us is not only to have a focus on a state level, but also to have a focus on the regional level. So in this picture, you can kind of see this is Lake Woodruff project that we did, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Lake Miccosukee, you can see Joe smiling there in the background. So not only are we looking at how are we going to deliver and be essential for ducks in Florida, but also in the region. So how do we focus this conservation delivery? We're very proud to be a very science-oriented organization, so everything that we do from protection to conservation is focused on research and the best information that's provided to us. So through research, and we'll talk a little bit about this as well, this is one of Bielefeld's mottle ducks here in the cage that has just undergone surgery, and then some blue wings here on the coast in Florida. But we take that research and the money we put into research and conservation and kind of direct where we're going with project delivery. Probably one of our proudest endeavors as far as how we're impacting waterfowl in the Flyway has been through the state grants program. As you can see, we have 4 of our 5 state agencies in our South Atlantic, and by the time I give this talk next year, we're going to add Virginia to that as well. This has been a very instrumental project throughout the Flyway. Different agencies deliver money to us in different manners. Some of them are through duck stamps, some of them are through allocated funds. But we have monies that come to us from Florida. I believe the value was somewhere around $22,000 this last year. And this is kind of a new demonstration versus the old Marsh days of how we deliver conservation. Every dollar that comes into us from Florida, we have specific regions identified in Canada to where this project money is going to go. The money comes to DU, we match it on a 1-to-1 basis, and then we take that money and leverage it with NACA funds, both in the US and Canada. Well, why is that important? Well, every dollar that comes to us can end up being either 3, 4, and in some cases 8-fold by the time it goes into the grass and prairies. I know a lot of people in Florida hear this from DU time and time again. It's important and essential for us to put these dollars back into Canada. But why is it really important? This kind of a demonstration of where the banded ducks in Florida that are harvested in Florida come from. And as you can see, a lot of in the prairie pothole region, 67% in North America, in the United States as well as Canada, and a lot of birds up in the Maritimes. A lot of the ringneck ducks and teal coming out of the prairies. Some of the mallards that get here that don't decide to stay are the ones out of the Maritimes. So also not only delivery that we work with on a broad scale like in the Flyway, we also have different project delivery that we work on within the South Atlantic. So we want to just kind of talk about the big broad categories and how we deliver conservation, and that's through grant writing and administration, engineering and survey. A unique thing to DU, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and us have a IDIQ where we're a contractor for the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's something kind of specific to Region 4, which is the region we're in now, as well as research support and land protection. So we'll just talk about each one of those a little bit. So grant writing and administration, why is that important to us? This goes back to as well as how we were dealing with the state grants program. We write a lot of grants through our office and our organization, with those mainly being NACA grants. This reemphasizes how important NACA is from us on a policy level as well as a conservation delivery. Through our office right now, we're writing about 4 to 5 NACA grants a year, which comes out to about $4 to $5 million in conservation delivery. We also work very closely with corporations, with foundations to write grants and take advantage of all those dollars available to be delivered, whether it be in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, or Virginia. Do have a little bit in Georgia that we've been dealing with NIF with. Those are grants that are tied back to corporations, but it's also a federal delivery program. And when it comes down to it, we can't do this alone. It's really important in these partnerships. Like I said, Steve and Joe and I rode around this week, and we've talked to some of the water management districts as well. We can't do this alone as an organization. We are the largest nonprofit in the world, but however, without our partners, we couldn't deliver half the work we do. So this kind of gives a demonstration. Everybody wants to see the duck head, as somebody said at a talk last week. It was a Nature Conservancy said that. Everybody wants to see the duck head with their partnership, but we're only one of many that makes it functional. So to give an example of what kind of leverage these NACA grants are doing, I just used an example out of South Carolina. We've been working on an initiative the last 3 years. This is called the South Carolina Low Country NACA initiative. So this kind of gives an example of how important NACA is and how well the money is leveraged. Since 2009, we've applied for 4 NACA grants. All but 3 out of 4 have been approved. The 4th one was just submitted last month, so that's pending approval. But for the $4 million we get from the federal government, we're leveraging that with partner contributions of over $16 million at a 4-to-1 match. So as we hear people say wasteful spending in Washington, wasteful programs, this is not a wasteful program. Like I said, for every dollar we're returning 4. So how does that go into delivery? This program so far has impacted over 25,000 acres, with 11,000 of that being protected in conservation easements, 11,000 of that being enhanced on federal and state land, and then over 2,200 of those being restored. That number will actually probably double. I think by the time we get all the acres assessed with just these 4 grants alone, we'll have impacted over 30,000 acres. And again, as we say, we can't deliver this on our own. Again, this is a big example of just some of the partners involved with this initiative: the Atlantic Coast Joint Venture, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Partners for Fish and Wildlife. Just an example, these acres were not delivered on areas that aren't being able to be utilized by the members of the public. Most of these, I think we've had 8 wildlife conservation areas, 4 national wildlife refuges, as well as other foundation ground that's accessible to the public. Another way we deliver projects out of South Carolina is, out of the South Atlantic office, is through engineering, survey, and design, as well as implementation, which is contract oversight and turnkey projects. This is Danny Baker, our engineer. We've got some of the most state-of-the-art surveying equipment available, as well as I believe now we're up to about 7 engineers in the South Atlantic office. So we're very well versed on how to deliver projects most efficient and cost efficient. This is an installation of a rice trunk in South Carolina. So we try to find these opportunities where we can, in many cases, as we've talked with Steve, they have monies available here in Florida, but a lot of time it comes down to the ability to put the project in the ground. So that's the place where we've really been able to help out. So just to get an idea of how those surveys and implementation go into projects, here's just one of our most recent lists of projects within Florida. You can see the breadth and scope of where we've worked in the state, and we hope to continue to add to this list. The other project delivery that I was talked about earlier is the IDIQ process, as well as DM projects with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. IDIQ, like we said, was an open bid process that DU was awarded a few years ago. It's indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, and DM projects are deferred maintenance projects. So these are monies that Fish and Wildlife Service has come into them. They can contact us directly. We can take those monies and deliver them into projects. For anybody that's in state government or federal government, everybody knows that paperwork slows everything down. So this has been a step that we've been able to achieve to streamline a lot of the contracting and delivery to be able, as soon as that money comes in, get it in the ground. I think a lot of the federal folks could tell you, they love getting called and say, hey, we've got all this money, but we need it delivered in 2 weeks. So those timelines get really tough, so that's where we've been able to really step in and help out. Just a couple examples of some recent IDIQ projects we're working on. Second phase of Lake Woodruff that we just completed this year. This is a pump station that was done years ago, and as you can see, again, emphasizing that partnership, but the Woodruff project was where we enhanced some of the embankments and the water control structures on the property. As you can see, our contractor here excavating a ditch, putting materials up to dry. He later came back and enhanced that bank. I believe we enhanced over 3 miles of bank there. And then here's just some of the water control structures that were installed. Another example of an ongoing project that we're working on within the Flyway that has implications to Florida as well as a staging area of birds coming down to Florida is an Alligator River project. This is a project we're working on with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in North Carolina right now, impacting about 6,000 acres with over $3 million of delivery. Just an idea of what kind of work we're doing and what kind of projects we're delivering. Fish and Wildlife Service came to us with the need to replace 5 48-inch pumps on the property. Thought they had about 30 feet of sheet piling that needed to be driven down, and we were able to come in with our expertise and say, you know, we really need to look at the implications of what's going to happen with this project. We drove the first piece of sheet piling at 30 feet, and it went out of sight. So we were fortunate to come back and find out that actually the only thing holding these banks up was that pump station. So after we've started driving sheet piling at 74 feet across that system and replacing these with 42-inch pumps to increase their efficiency and water delivery on that habitat, I think it's going to be a great project. We hope to finish that one up next year. But again, an example of working with an agency that they really know what they want, but sometimes the expertise that we have to be able to deliver those projects can kind of streamline those costs. One of the last two things I wanted to talk about as far as helping us decide where we need to deliver the projects, where we need to deliver habitat, is our research support. Over the last few years, we worked with North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida on some telemetry studies. The bottom left, you'll see a pintail involved with a pintail telemetry study in North Carolina. Anxious to see from Joe which one's the Florida mottle duck. We get a lot of joking around with Joe saying that we've got these introduced species from Louisiana that we now have in South Carolina, but similar to what Beaterfield and Ron's come up and help us give support in South Carolina, we're doing some internal transmitter studies in South Carolina to get a better idea of where those birds are going, and as Joe said, at least we know they're not coming into Florida and infecting his genetics, so it's all just to keep Joe happy. That's what it all comes down to. But that research support lets us identify what habitats are important, where these birds are going, and get a better idea. We've had some real interesting discussions. We've learned some stuff in South Carolina that we didn't think mottle ducks did. Joe could probably speak up and say what some of the movements they've seen in Florida have been for mottle ducks, but it's usually under 100 miles. We've seen birds in South Carolina that have come as far south as the Georgia-Florida line, and they saw the sign and said to go back home. And then we've also had birds that have gone up to Pamlico Sound. So some really good information coming out on mottle ducks within the Flyway. We hope to bring Georgia on board in a couple of years and kind of figure out that last missing link to see how those populations, if at all, are mixing. And the last topic I'll talk about is land protection. Land protection is very important. There is an entity associated with Ducks Unlimited, Wetlands America Trust, that holds easements within the United States. Why do we hold easements, and why are we worried about perpetual land protection? Well, in many areas it's some fragmented habitat that we're able to take advantage, or some unique habitats. With last couple of years we've been able to close some easements on some wood stork habitats, wood stork rookeries in South Carolina. So there's that connectivity of fragmented lands. A lot of times the refuge systems can't hold all those lands, but we're able to step in and hold some of those properties, hold easements to those properties, as well as the tax incentives for some landowners. So again, we don't go out and do this blindly. This looks at some of our focus area across the United States. Of course, everybody hears about the easements we go after in the prairie pothole regions. Just an example, with some of those NACA dollars going to the prairies, everybody says, you guys talk about the prairies all the time. When are you guys going to spend enough money on the prairies and be caught up? Give you an example, right now we have over 900 people on a waiting list to take easements in the prairies. So we continue to spend a lot of money, but there's a lot of people that if the money was even greater than what it is now, we could deliver more habitat. And in more of a focus of what's going on in the South Atlantic with easements, in South Carolina, DU currently holds about 120,000 acres in easements. We hold another 10,000 acres in easements in North Carolina. And again, those are really working with our partners, with other nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy, working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to try to capture those habitats to enhance, that'll eventually enhance the federal and state protection. So in closing, what's going on in Florida? What are we looking forward to this week? Like I said, we went out and looked at a few projects. We're really excited about some potential opportunities coming up on a couple areas like Apopka as well as Pine Meadows. We've looked at some opportunities working with the water management districts to maybe enhance some habitat there in a few years. We continue to work with Florida, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and other corporations to build those partnerships. And then we also look for opportunities to take the dollars that are available and try to deliver that habitat as efficiently as possible. With that, I hope I haven't put you to sleep. Steve was so eloquent and charged up this morning that he said, just don't put everybody to sleep after I get done getting them charged up. So I'll take any questions if you got.